Welcome back to the Deep Dive. If you're here with us, you're looking to really get to grips with complex topics, find those key insights fast, but also thoroughly.
Yeah, those aha moments.
Yeah, exactly. And we really value you being part of this. Before we jump into today's legal maze, I do have a quick but really vital request.
Go for it.
Please, if you haven't already hit that subscribe button on the channel, it genuinely makes a huge difference and helps us keep putting in the time needed for these deep dives.
It really does support the show.
And also, pop over to our website. You'll find links to the sources, including the actual statute text we're digging into today. It's all there for you.
Good stuff.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We're stepping into, well, the often pretty dense world of the Penal Code, specifically Chapter 29, which deals with robbery.
Right. A topic everyone thinks they know, but the legal details are crucial.
That's just it. You hear robbery, you hear aggravated robbery, you know one's worse. But why? If you're prepping for something, studying, or just, really curious, knowing the exact legal line is everything.
Where does that line get drawn? How does a second-degree felony suddenly become a first-degree one?
Precisely. So our mission today, cut through all that legalese. We're going to dissect the core differences between these related crimes using the actual statute text from Chapter 29 as our guide.
Line by line.
Yeah. We want to know not just what these crimes are, but why the law separates them the way it does, looking at context, intent, the consequences.
And that context, that's the whole game, really. It often boils down to seemingly tiny details, doesn't it?
Like what?
Well, was there an injury? What kind of injury? Was a weapon shown or just hinted at? How old was the victim? These details are what trigger different classifications.
Wow.
So our goal is to shine a light on those exact distinctions. By the end of this, you should have a really solid framework for understanding how the law views violent theft, from the basic elements all the way to newer specific tactics like jugging.
All right, so to really grasp robbery, we first need to understand its foundations. How does the law link the act of stealing the theft to the use of violence? It all hinges on one key phrase in the statute, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It's the connective tissue.
And that phrase is, in the course of committing theft. So what's the legal weight of that phrase? How does it define when a robbery is actually happening?
It's the linchpin, as you said. It basically ensures the force or the threat is directly tied to getting or keeping the property. And crucially, the law stretches that time frame pretty deliberately.
Stretches it how? So it's not just during the actual grab.
Exactly. The offender can't just say, oh, I already had the wallet, then I pushed him. That's separate. The law anticipates that. So the statute, Section 29.01, breaks in the course of committing theft into 3 specific windows. Any one of these counts.
What are they?
Okay, first 2 are pretty straightforward. 1, conduct that happens in an attempt to commit theft. So even before they succeed.
Right. Makes sense.
2, conduct that happens during the commission of the theft. The actual taking.
Okay, the obvious one. But it's the third one that really expands things, isn't it? The one people might forget.
This is probably the most critical part for prosecutors. It covers conduct that happens in immediate flight after the attempt or commission of theft.
Immediate flight, so the getaway.
Precisely. It recognizes that using force to escape with the stolen property is part of the robbery itself. It's not a separate assault that happens later. It completes the robbery.
Let's paint a picture. Say someone snatches a fancy watch from a store counter. They've got it. Theft complete, technically. But as they're sprinting for the door, a security guard tries to stop them, and the thief shoves the guard hard, knocking them down, specifically to keep hold of that watch and get away. The force happened after they took the watch.
Perfect example. That shove, because it happened during the immediate getaway and was done to keep control of the stolen property, elevates the whole thing from just theft, a property crime, to robbery, which is a crime against a person.
So the violence during the escape is legally tied back to the theft itself.
As long as it's in that window of immediate flight. That word immediate is key. It has to be closely connected in time and place.
So if they drive 3 towns over and then get in a fight, that's different.
Completely different. That would likely be a separate assault charge. But if it's, say, 30 seconds later in the mall parking lot as they're scrambling to their car, the court's almost certainly going to see that as part of the continuous act of the robbery.
Got it. It prevents offenders from segmenting the crime to lessen the charge. The timeline is more elastic than you might think.
Yep.
Okay, so that's the timing. What about the other foundation piece? Property.
Yeah.
We think of property as, a wallet, a phone, a car. Physical stuff. But the legal definition here seems much broader.
It has to be, especially now. If property only meant physical things you can touch, a lot of modern crime would slip through the cracks.
How so?
Well, the statute, Section 29.012, covers a couple of main areas. First, it includes tangible or intangible personal property, and anything severed from land, too.
Tangible is easy cash, jewelry. But intangible, what does that cover? That feels important.
It's incredibly important. Think about digital assets. If someone threatens you, forces you to give up the password to your Bitcoin wallet, right?
Okay.
Or maybe they force you to transfer ownership of a valuable domain name or an NFT under threat. They haven't physically taken anything from your pocket.
Right, no cash changed hands physically.
But they've absolutely robbed you of valuable, intangible personal property. Same goes for things like, say, sensitive corporate data, trade secrets, client lists stored on a server. The crime isn't about stealing the hard drive itself. It's about the data on it. That data is property.
Wow, okay, so forcing someone to hand over login credentials or access keys could be robbery under this definition.
Absolutely. It dramatically broadens the scope. And the second part of the definition reinforces this idea, too. It says property also includes a document, including money, that represents or embodies anything of value.
Represents or embodies value. What does that mean practically?
Think about it. The value isn't always in the physical paper or plastic itself, but in what it stands for. A $100 bill is obviously money, property.
Sure.
But what about a stock certificate or a bearer bond or even just a check or a promissory note? Physically, it might just be paper.
But it represents potentially huge value.
Exactly. And stealing those documents through force or threat, that's robbery because you're gaining control over the value they legally embody. It's designed to be comprehensive, covering pretty much any kind of asset, physical or symbolic, when violence is involved.
Okay, so we've got the time frame locked down in the course of committing theft, including that immediate flight. And we understand that property is super broad, covering tangible and intangible stuff. Now let's get to the main event. Section 29.02, the actual offense of robbery. This is where theft stops being just about property and becomes about violence against a person.
Right, the escalation point. And it's entirely driven by adding violence or the threat of violence. You have to meet those foundational requirements. First, the theft context, the intent to get or keep the property, and then you add force.
And the statute gives two ways this can happen, right? Two paths to commit robbery.
Yes, two distinct paths. You only need to satisfy one of them. Both are about what happens physically or psychologically to the victim.
Let's take path one first, causing injury.
Okay, path one is straightforward on the surface. The person causes bodily injury to another. Now, bodily injury itself is defined pretty broadly in law. It means physical pain, illness, or any impairment of physical condition.
So it doesn't have to be horrific. A punch that leaves a bruise, a shove that causes someone to fall and scrape their knee.
That could certainly qualify as bodily injury, yes. A cut needing stitches, maybe twisting an ankle, it covers a range.
But here's where it gets tricky, I think. The mental state required for that injury. It doesn't have to be intentional, does it? The statute says intentional, knowing, or reckless.
Bingo. And that or recklessly part is absolutely crucial. It dramatically lowers the bar compared to proving someone specifically intended to hurt the person.
What does recklessly mean in this legal sense? It sounds a bit vague.
It's a defined legal term. Basically, it means the person was aware of a substantial and unjustifiable risk that their actions would cause the injury, but they consciously decided to ignore that risk and went ahead anyway.
So they didn't necessarily want to hurt the person, but they knew their actions were dangerous and could easily lead to injury, and they just didn't care.
That's a good way to put it. Their main goal might be the theft and escape, but the injury is a foreseeable, high-probability consequence of how they're acting, and they disregard that danger.
Can you give us a concrete example of recklessness in a robbery?
Sure. Let's go back to the mall scenario. Purse snatcher, running through a crowded store. They know it's packed with shoppers.
Okay.
But they just start bulldozing through people, shoving them aside violently to get to the exit. They knock over an elderly shopper who falls and breaks their hip.
Okay, a serious injury there.
Right. Now, the thief's main intent was getting away with the purse, not breaking someone's hip. They probably didn't want that specific injury to happen. But any reasonable person knows that violently shoving people in a crowded space creates a huge risk of someone getting hurt, potentially seriously. Because the thief was aware of that risk, or should have been, and ignored it, consciously disregarded it, their actions were reckless.
And because that reckless action caused bodily injury, in the course of committing theft.
It becomes robbery, a second-degree felony. Not just misdemeanor theft, plus maybe a separate misdemeanor assault charge. The recklessness links the injury directly to the theft under the robbery statute. It's a massive difference in penalty.
That really clarifies the reckless standard. It connects the violence, even unintended violence, directly to the theft motive.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's path one, causing injury, even recklessly. What's path two? This one focuses more on the psychological impact.
Right. Path 2 involves no physical injury at all. It requires the person to intentionally or knowingly threaten or place another in fear of imminent bodily injury or death.
This sounds like the classic stick-up scenario. Your money or your life.
Pretty much. The key legal term here, as you pointed out, is imminent. The fear has to be of immediate harm right now.
So a vague threat about something happening next week wouldn't cut it for robbery under this path. Like, give me your wallet or I'll come back and slash your tires tomorrow.
Correct. That might be another crime like coercion or terroristic threat, depending on the specifics, but it likely wouldn't satisfy the imminence requirement for robbery. The victim has to feel they are in danger right now.
What about ambiguity? Does the robber have to actually show a weapon? What if they just, keep a hand hidden in their jacket pocket and imply they have a gun? Give me the cash, don't make me use this.
Great question. No, they don't necessarily have to show a weapon. The law focuses on whether the victim was placed in fear.
So it's about the victim's perception.
Yes, if that perception is reasonable, based on the robber's words, actions, demeanor, the whole context, if someone says, I have a gun, give me the money, and acts convincingly, the victim is reasonably placed in fear of imminent harm, even if it later turns out the robber was bluffing and had no weapon.
So the communication of an immediate threat is enough.
It is. Actual injury isn't needed for this path. Successfully creating that immediate fear is sufficient to elevate the theft to robbery. It protects victims by not forcing them to call the bluff, essentially.
Okay, so wrapping up section 29.02. Robbery is theft plus violence or the threat of imminent violence. The violence can be injury caused intentionally, knowingly, or even just recklessly. Or it can be the intentional or knowing creation of fear of imminent harm. And this baseline robbery is classified as
a felony of the second degree, a very serious charge.
Second-degree felony is serious, definitely carries significant prison time, but the law recognizes situations that are even worse. Now we move up the ladder to section 29.03, aggravated robbery. The name itself tells you this is robbery plus something extra that makes it exceptionally dangerous.
That's exactly right. It's built upon the foundation of robbery. So first, the elements of section 29.02 robbery must be met: the theft, the force, or threat.
Okay, so you've already committed a second-degree felony.
Correct. And then if one of three specific aggravating factors is present, the crime escalates dramatically.
So dramatically.
It becomes a felony of the first degree. This is the highest level of felony charge in the state, reserved for the most severe offenses like murder, rape, kidnapping. The law treats aggravated robbery with that level of gravity.
Wow. Okay, so what are these three trigger factors? What pushes robbery into that top tier? Let's break them down one by one. Factor one.
Factor one relates back to the injury we discussed, but takes it to another level. The offense becomes aggravated robbery if the perpetrator causes serious bodily injury to another.
Okay, serious is bodily injury. We need to define that carefully. How does it differ from the bodily injury needed for basic robbery?
It's a significant legal distinction. Bodily injury, remember, was pain, illness, or any impairment. It could be temporary, like a bruise or a cut. Serious bodily injury, however, is defined much more gravely. It typically means bodily injury that creates a substantial risk of death or that causes death, serious permanent disfigurement, or protracted loss or impairment of the function of any bodily member or organ.
Protracted loss or impairment. Permanent disfigurement. Substantial risk of death. Okay, so this isn't just getting hurt. This is life-altering stuff.
Exactly. Think about the difference between, say, a broken arm that heals bodily injury versus losing an eye or suffering paralysis in a limb or a brain injury that causes permanent cognitive deficits, serious bodily injury.
The law is drawing a line based on the permanence and severity of the harm to the victim's life and bodily function.
Precisely. When the consequences are that dire, that potentially lifelong, the law imposes the first-degree penalty. It reflects the extreme violence inflicted.
Makes complete sense. Okay, factor 2. This is probably the one most people associate with the term aggravated robbery.
Right, the deadly weapon. The statute says the offense is aggravated if the perpetrator uses or exhibits a deadly weapon during the commission of the robbery.
Uses or exhibits. That or exhibits seems really important.
Critically important. Uses is clear. They shoot the gun, they stab with the knife, they hit someone with the bat. But exhibits means they just have to show it.
So just pulling out a gun and pointing it, even if they don't fire it or touch the victim with it.
That's enough. The moment they brandish it, make its presence known in a threatening way during the robbery, the charge elevates to aggravated robbery. The first-degree felony is triggered right there.
Why is this showing it enough?
Because the law recognizes the extreme terror and the immediate potential for lethal violence that's created the instant a deadly weapon is introduced into the situation. The potential for mass harm or death skyrockets. That potential itself is considered a sufficient aggravating factor.
And deadly weapon isn't just guns and knives, is it?
No, the legal definition is broader. It includes anything that, in the manner of its use or intended use, is capable of causing death or serious bodily injury.
So potentially a car driven at someone, a heavy pipe, a steel-toed boot used to stomp someone.
Absolutely. Depending on how it's used or threatened to be used in the context of the robbery, many seemingly ordinary objects can become deadly weapons under the law, triggering the aggravated robbery charge.
Okay, so serious bodily injury or use exhibition of a deadly weapon. What's the third aggravating factor? This one focuses on the victim, right?
Yes. Factor 3 shifts the focus to protecting specific vulnerable populations. The offense automatically becomes aggravated robbery if the robbery, meeting the 29.02 standard, is committed against a victim who is either 65 years of age or older, or the victim is a disabled person.
Wait, so even if the injury caused was minor, let's say just a shove that causes a bruise, meeting the basic bodily injury for robbery if the victim happens to be 70 years old, that automatically makes it aggravated robbery a first-degree felony.
Correct. The age of the victim alone is the aggravating factor here. The law provides heightened protection for seniors, viewing the targeting of them during a violent crime as inherently more egregious.
That's a strong statement. And the second part of that factor is targeting a disabled person. How does the statute define that? It seems like that could be open to interpretation.
The statute provides a specific legal definition to avoid ambiguity. Section 29.03, A3B, references the definition in other parts of the code, but the essence is an individual with a mental, physical, or developmental disability who is substantially unable to protect himself from harm.
Okay, that phrase seems key. Substantially unable to protect himself from harm. It's not just having any disability.
Exactly. It's about the disability rendering the person particularly vulnerable, significantly impairing their ability to defend themselves or escape during the commission of the robbery.
Like someone who uses a wheelchair, or perhaps someone with a significant cognitive impairment.
Those could certainly fit the definition. The law recognizes the gross imbalance of power when an offender uses violence against someone whose disability makes them an easier target. It sees this as exceptionally predatory behavior.
So targeting vulnerability itself becomes the reason for the first-degree felony charge, regardless of the weapon used or the severity of the injury, as long as the base robbery elements are met.
Precisely. It reflects a societal value judgment embedded directly into the highest level of criminal classification.
All right, we've covered robbery, the baseline violent theft, and aggravated robbery, the escalated version involving extreme harm, weapons, or vulnerable victims. Now we're shifting gears to something quite different, a very specific and relatively new offense called jugging, laid out in Section 29.04.
Yes, this is a fascinating addition, effective September 1st, 2025. It reflects how the law tries to adapt to evolving criminal methods.
Jugging. It sounds informal, almost like slang. What exactly is this crime targeting? What behavior are lawmakers trying to stop here?
It's targeting a very specific predatory pattern. Jugging describes scenarios where criminals hang around banks or other financial spots, watch for someone making a large withdrawal or valuable transaction.
Okay, they spot a target.
Right. Then they follow that person, often very stealthily, sometimes for miles. And when the victim stops maybe at home, at another store, wherever the criminals strike, they might break into the victim's car to get the cash or sometimes confront and rob the victim directly.
So it's planned. Targeted theft based on observing financial activity.
Exactly. And the statute reflects that specific intent. Jugging is committed with the intent to commit theft of another person's money, Notice the focus on money here, linking it directly back to that financial transaction observation.
Unlike general robbery, which just requires intent to steal property.
Yeah.
Okay. So, jugging seems to focus heavily on the actions before the actual theft or confrontation. What are the specific elements the prosecution needs to prove for this crime?
There are two core elements, and both must be proven. It's about the combination of surveillance and preparation.
Element no.
Element one is the surveillance and travel part. The statute says the person knowingly travels from a commercial business or financial institution on the same path or route as another person without substantially deviating from that path or route.
Okay, financial institution, that seems clear, like a bank or credit union. What about commercial business? And the statute mentions a specific finance code section.
Right. It references Section 201 or 101 of the Finance Code. That definition is broad and covers banks, savings banks, credit unions, trust companies, and potentially other related businesses like check cashing places or even large retailers known for handling cash transactions, depending on interpretation. The point is, the following starts from a place associated with money handling.
And following on the same path or route without substantially deviating. That sounds like it requires pretty direct tracking.
It does. It's meant to capture deliberate, focused following, not just coincidentally driving in the same direction for a block or two. It establishes that the suspect is actively tailing the victim after they've likely obtained money.
Okay, so that's the following element. What's element two?
Yeah.
It's not enough just to follow, right?
Correct. Element 2 requires the means to commit the crime. While doing that following, the person must also be in possession of 2 or more criminal instruments.
Criminal instruments. That sounds technical. What qualifies? The statute points to another section, 16.01.
Yes. Section 16.01 defines criminal instruments. We don't have the full text here, but generally these are items specifically designed, made, or adapted for use in committing a crime.
So not just everyday tools, like having a hammer isn't enough.
Probably not, unless maybe it was clearly adapted for breaking into cars quickly. Think more specialized things. For jugging, common examples might be lockpicks, slim jims for car doors, maybe electronic devices for disabling car alarms or key fobs, window punches, even things like GPS trackers they might have slipped onto the victim's car, or maybe tools clearly meant for a quick smash and grab.
So the combination is spotting someone at a money place, deliberately following their exact route, and having at least 2 tools specifically meant for committing a crime, likely theft or burglary.
That's the unique combination the jugging statute isolates. It's criminalizing this specific predatory preparation.
It's interesting because it allows intervention before the theft or robbery actually happens.
Exactly. If officers observe this specific pattern, the following from the bank, plus they find the criminal instruments during a stop, they can potentially make an arrest for jugging itself, interrupting the crime before the victim is even aware or harmed.
Now, the sentencing for jugging seems layered. It's not just one level. What's the baseline penalty?
If someone is convicted of just the jugging offense itself, meeting the 2 elements of following and possessing instruments, but before any further crime like burglary or robbery occurs, the base offense is a state jail felony.
State jail felony. Okay, it's still serious, but lower than robbery. How does it escalate?
It escalates based on what happens next, reflecting the typical outcome of these jugging schemes. There are 2 main escalation points.
Escalation 1.
It jumps up to a felony of the 3rd degree if, during the jugging offense, meaning as part of that continuous criminal episode, the actor also commits an offense under Section 30.04.
Section 30.04. What's that?
That's the statute for burglary of vehicles. So this covers the classic jugging scenario. Follow the victim home or to a store, wait for them to get out of the car, then break into the car to steal the money they just withdrew.
So jugging plus car burglary equals 3rd degree felony.
Correct. The law connects the preparation, jugging, with the common method of completing the theft, vehicle burglary, and assigns a mid-level felony penalty.
And escalation 2, this brings us back to robbery, doesn't it?
It does, and it's the most severe escalation. The jugging offense becomes a felony of the 1st degree if, during its commission, the actor also commits an offense under Section 29.02, which is robbery.
Wow. So if the jugging plan culminates not just in breaking into a car, but in actually confronting the victim with force or threats to get the money,
then the whole sequence, the surveillance, the following, the possession of instruments, plus the robbery is treated as a 1st degree felony, same level as aggravated robbery.
that's a powerful link. It's saying that if you start with this specific calculated preparation, jugging, and it ends in violence against the person, robbery, The entire course of conduct warrants the maximum penalty level.
Exactly. It reflects the premeditated and targeted nature of the violence when it stems from a jugging scheme.
One last point on this section. The statute mentions prosecution flexibility. What does that mean?
It's a practical point for prosecutors. The law explicitly states that if the actor's conduct fits the definition of jugging and also fits another crime, like theft, burglary of a vehicle, or robbery, they can be prosecuted for jugging or for the other crime or for both.
So they can stack the charges.
Potentially, yes. It gives prosecutors the discretion to charge in a way that fully reflects the criminal behavior, from the planning stages right through to the final act. It prevents a defense argument like, well, they committed robbery, so you can't also charge them for the jugging preparation. The law says, yes, you can. #tag outro.
Okay, that brings us through a really detailed journey across Chapter 29. We've seen how the law carefully builds layers of severity around the act of theft when force is involved.
From the foundation up to these very specific modern adaptations.
We started with that crucial groundwork, defining in the course of committing theft to include that immediate flight, making the getaway part of the crime.
And broadening property beyond just physical cash to include intangible assets, digital keys, things like that.
Then we hit the core offense, robbery, Section 29.02. That's the second-degree felony where theft gets combined with force. And remember that force can be actual bodily injury caused intentionally, knowingly, or even just recklessly.
Or it can simply be the threat, intentionally or knowingly placing someone in fear of imminent harm. No actual injury needed for that path.
Right. From there, we escalated to aggravated robbery, Section 29.03. That's the first-degree felony, triggered by crossing critical thresholds.
Namely, causing serious bodily injury, the life-altering kind. Or using or even just exhibiting a deadly weapon. Or, thirdly, targeting a vulnerable victim defined by age, 65 plus, or disability rendering them substantially unable to protect themselves.
And finally, we looked at this new, highly specific crime, jugging, Section 29.04. This targets the preparatory phase, knowingly following someone from a financial spot on their exact route while carrying 2 or more criminal instruments.
Starting as a state jail felony, but escalating to a third-degree felony if it includes vehicle burglary, and all the way up to a first-degree felony if it culminates in robbery.
It really shows the spectrum, doesn't it?
Yeah.
State jail, second-degree, third-degree, and first-degree felonies, all branching from the initial concept of theft combined with varying levels of force, planning, or victim vulnerability.
Absolutely. And what really stands out is how the law focuses intently on the behavior of the actor and the risk imposed on the victim. These distinctions aren't just random, they reflect careful legal and social judgments about culpability and danger.
Any final thought for our listeners to chew on after all this?
Well, I think that jugging statute is particularly thought-provoking. It's different because it explicitly criminalizes a preparatory act. It's not waiting for the punch to land or the gun to be shown. It's intervening based on a pattern of behavior the following, the tools that strongly indicates an impending crime.
It's trying to get ahead of the violence.
Exactly. It's proactive, in a sense.
Yeah.
So here's something to consider. What does this trend towards criminalizing specific preparatory behaviors tell us about where criminal law might be heading? As criminals get more sophisticated, especially with technology, think complex cyber theft schemes, coordinated disinformation campaigns leading to fraud, things like that, we see more laws trying to define and outlaw the planning stages. What might the next preparatory crime look like in the Penal Code 5 or 10 years from now?
That's a fascinating question.
Yeah.
How far back can the law effectively reach to prevent harm before it happens? Definitely food for thought.
Indeed.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the nuances of robbery and its related offenses. Hopefully, we've managed to bring some clarity to that complexity. Remember, understanding the why behind these legal lines is key.
Absolutely.
And one last reminder, if you found this valuable, please do subscribe to the channel. It helps immensely. And check out the resources on our website. We appreciate you tuning in.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.